Welcome to the Bare Essentials Podcast, where the talk is real and hibernating on your goals is not an option.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Charles Wallace. Today's guest is a husband, family man, food lover, and a high-performance fanatic. After many years of poor health choices started to take their toll on him, he decided to make a massive change and put an end to his low energy, mood, and confidence for good. Once he saw that high performance and a healthy body and mind could actually go hand in hand, he set out to build an unbeatable program to help high-performing men get fit without sacrificing their whole schedule. His mission is to accomplish something extraordinary in helping others find their strength. Being a natural old soul, he has dedicated much of his focus on coaching successful businessmen and high performers in their 40s and 50s. Us old guys, you know who you are, so pay attention. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Logan Henry. Logan, thanks for joining. I'm so excited. Can't wait to start.
I'm excited too, Charles. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be here. And I'm excited to get some, like you said in the beginning, hopefully someone will take something from this and inspire them to take some kind of action, regardless of what it is.
Well, I can just say we've talked for about 10 minutes before this started, and you already motivated me. I'm ready to jump out of my seat here and get moving for the day. So I can't wait.
You inspired me, man. If your listeners haven't heard your story yet, I think that is definitely a podcast for a day that you should do solo, because anybody listening to this, Charles got a very powerful story, and he's done incredible with his own fitness journey and weight loss and health. And so you inspired me, man.
Well, thank you for that. Logan, could you just a brief introduction to the audience, a little bit about yourself before we dig deep in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Logan Henry. I've spent most of my years pretty much in Charleston, South Carolina. I was born in Tennessee, grew up a little bit in the Midwest, and then just found myself down in Charleston and haven't moved since. I'm a husband, married to my wife, Erica. Overall, been working the last 10 years with high performers, typically guys, like you said, in their 40s and 50s, who have created massive success in their life, putting so much emphasis on whether it's building a business, leading teams, and along that process, trying to balance that and also family life. Their attention's being pulled 1,000 different directions. And because of that, they've unintentionally sometimes let their health on the back burner. And so I help those guys, and I've helped the last 10 years. Basically, I always say, when people ask, what is it that you do? I always tease, like we're at a regular social event. I always tease it because I don't like to box it in. I always say, well, I'm a time traveler. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, when was the last time you were in the best shape of your life, or you felt and looked like $1 million? And they were like, man, it's been forever. And it's usually, and I say, okay, well, I help guys, and it's usually I'm talking to a guy I only bring that up if someone's of the age range, if I know. And I say, well, I help those guys go back in time and bring back the guy that they remember from their younger years, who was full of energy, full of enthusiasm, and just had a body and just mental clarity that he was just proud of. He could look in the mirror, he could put clothes on, he walked tall with his shoulders back. So I just help bring that guy back, but only better. So that's pretty much my story in a very Cliff Note nutshell version.
I like that though, Logan, time traveler. That's good. And I think for myself and a lot of my audience listening and watching, I think that's what we want. It's just that life gets in the way and we're always looking for help. And I think once our mind decides that we need to do that, it's people like you that can help us along that journey. So what made you start wanting to help people regarding that?
So I actually hit my own moment of what I deem as being sick and tired of being sick and tired, where I had been basically focused so much on, work, like regular work before I was doing any of this. And then, keeping up with relationships. And then along the way, I think my own vices were, of course, mindless eating, drinking a little bit. And I think one day I looked in the mirror, just not only feeling like crap all the time and felt lethargic and just blah, but one day I looked in the mirror and I remember even seeing a photo that my wife, Erica, had taken. And I was like, whoa, like, that's not me. And if you look at, it's online and stuff like that, that I've been posting for over 10 years now. So if you look at what would deem as before photo, most would think that it's, oh, he's not that bad. But in that moment, they didn't see internally what was going on. Aside from, a little bit of the gut that was coming along, clothes not fitting like they were, I just didn't like myself. I didn't like myself. I was moody, irritable, and I wasn't enjoying life, even though at the age that I was, I should have been really enjoying life at that time, and I wasn't. And so from that moment, and like once I saw that picture, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Just by happenstance, I wanted to search for a solution. And, I was trying things on my own, doing things, but then I think I was just very fortunate enough to have come across my first mentor. His name was Greg, and he completely changed my entire life. He was a West Point graduate, former Army Ranger. And he brought me into a world that I just was not in, a mentality that I had not grown up with. So to give you maybe some insight, I grew up in a divorced family, which, by the way, it wasn't like the hardcore trouble story of, things were bad. I was 2 when my parents got divorced. So growing up, I had, almost 2 dads. I had my stepdad, Mike, who was one way. And then I had my father, Terry. And so I grew up with seeing certain patterns, and both of those guys were, very hardworking, determined, just like the guys that I work with. But when they always say that somewhere along the way, that after your father figures or whatever, there's always like a third party person that may come along the way, that typically for men, I'm not sure how it is for women, but men, almost like a third role model that's like of an outside source. And Greg was that for me. So he came along, put me to work. I put in the effort of the plan, helped guide me, get me out of the funk that I was in. And I was like, oh my God, I feel so much more alive. I'm liking how I look. I loving how I'm feeling. The energy was through the roof. And I think in that moment of transformation, I said, man, like I would hate to not someone else to not experience this, especially if they were in the state, even just an ounce of what I was in. And then come along the way, I think, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is I have always resonated with the older fraternity. If your listeners are watching this, that, it's like, what does someone in their young 30s know about someone in their 40s and 50s? Well, again, seeing my father's growing up, and I'm also the youngest of 7. So I grew up, and my brother, who's above me, is 7 years older than me. So I'm the youngest of 7, and he's the next one up the ladder. So that I've always kind of learned from the older crowd. I've always hung out with the older fraternity. I love connecting. And also, growing up in my household, my stepdad, I love him to death, but he was, he would share, I couldn't wait till you turned 18 so we could have an intellectual conversation. So he was very, an adult driven conversation, not necessarily in the kid world. But that's kind of, I think, what had I gravitated towards the older fraternity, everything that I saw growing up, and what I learned from Greg, who is actually older than me. I applied those strategies, put things together. And ever since the last 10 years, been fine tuning things to help guys, who are really smart, driven, determined men, that they've got a lot of great things going on for them. But sometimes they find themselves maybe a little bit lost when it comes to taking care of their own health and wellness, because oftentimes the question is, how in the world am I going to take care of myself with the little time and energy that I do have? So I kind of bring that back, and that's pretty much it. I don't know if that covers it.
No, absolutely. And y'all, great. Thank you. Great segue into what I wanted to ask you next. So yeah, I think not just men, right? Not older men, or just people in general, right? They always seem to put their fitness and health at the bottom of the list when it comes to their priorities. And it amazes me. And I was guilty of this for years. Like, there were so many other things that I put above my health and my fitness. Like, yeah. Could you Why in your experience, what are some of those reasons? Why do they do that? And how do you help them to make their health and fitness a priority?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my experience, there's a few things that are happening. But the first, as I'll get in kind of maybe what especially high performers in their 40s and 50s, or just anybody who's busy in general may face, the challenges they may face. But one thing I have observed in my observation over 10 years, especially with busy men, is sometimes there's this delayed mentality. And that delayed mentality is if I can force my way enough through, plowing through work, whether it's building the empire, building the business, or just going up the ladder in their career, if I can do that, well, then I'll amass everything that I need to amass, and then I'll take care of my health when I've got the time, right? But oftentimes what typically happens is, especially with my guys, they'll burn the candle at both ends for so long to where there is no, well, here's when it's going to happen at this time. There is no later mentality. And so sometimes they'll come in and they may be like, think to themselves, well, I'm not bad. At least I'm not off that bad. Or, you know what, I've had people in my family that maybe they've seen people in their family that could wait to get their health together later on in life. But I always deem the question of what's the alternative, right? There's always a price to pay eventually, and I'm sure you've heard this before somewhere. If you are so focused on, I'm not telling these guys not to continue to work hard. What I'm saying is, how can we equal it out in the same way that you're doing everything else? I always look at it this way, and I do this kind of, if I don't know if the viewers probably listen to this can't see this, but if you look at right over here, here's the guy, right? And then here's building the business, building the career, everything, maybe a little bit of family with a little energy he does have left. But if he doesn't build himself at the same time, here's what's going to happen. Collapse. Over. So the delayed mentality of I'll take care of it when, I've learned that there's no, happy ending to an unhappy journey. And the alternative, if someone's like, well, yeah, what is the alternative? Could it be unexpected sickness? And if they think, well, I'm invincible now, I'll be fine. Okay. Maybe it's not an unexpected sickness. Maybe it's divorce, and I know that sometimes we're like, what do you mean divorce? Well, it's not necessarily, even though, yes, guys in my world will get in shape. And I'm not saying that because someone is out of shape, they're going to know. It's how is that showing up for them? If they're low on energy, and most of the time, one of the challenges my guys have is that at the end of the day, they have absolutely nothing left in the tank to give to the people that want their attention the most. The reason that they're going to work in the first place to provide, it's usually they're coming home to those people, whether it's wife, kids, partner, you name it. And typically there's nothing left in the tank. So they may be present, but yet unavailable, or they're there, but they're not really there. And so then that can stem into that. Or one, I think as men in general, that if that doesn't ring a bell, typically I think us as men, anybody that whether we're leading, especially my guys that have kids, even if you don't have to say it, the implicit promise that we're giving is that we're going to lead by example. And, if anybody that has kids, they know that they're going to mirror everything you do, not what you say, but only what you do. And so typically whether they say anything, whether the kids say anything or not, they're mirroring every move that you do. And so that is another reason it's like, okay, even if you're not worried about sickness, not worried about divorce, what about the implicit promise of someone that you're leading your world, even if it's just your colleagues, right? Because there's that underlying thing. It's like, okay, if he can take care of himself, then I'm going to trust that he can lead me to where I want to go. So that would be the first thing, is delayed mentality. The next, and we kind of touched, I know you had mentioned it earlier, in terms of the challenges that they face. So let's say that they don't have the delayed mentality, like the individual is like, man, I really want to get this solved. Well, they're also dealing with a lot of challenges. Typically, they're balancing so many balls up in the air, people turning at their attention. And a lot of times, so first would be a jam-packed schedule. So there's a lot of things, people pulling at their attention. We need you for this, we need you for this. And I think a lot of times, guys in general, I think in our nature is to be providers, protectors, rescuers. There is a sense of we can give a lot more to others than sometimes we're willing to give to ourselves, right? Like, and there's almost this, that I think another thing is a sense of feeling guilty if they put themselves first, because I've got all these other people depending on me. And I get that. And what I share with them is that if you constantly keep believing yourself last and you're burning the candle at both ends for so long, eventually you're not going to have anything left to give. And that's where I think that guilt can kind of go away on the wayside, is like, looking, if you just, give a little bit of time to yourself, you're going to be able to give much more to everyone else in your world. So that would be it. Jam-packed schedule. And another thing is, it typically, when guys come to me, they'll say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So a lot of my guys, though they might not like the way their body looks, or they might not, the extra weight they're holding or how their clothes fit, a lot of them are just exhausted and drained. And so the energy is like a huge thing. And so one of their challenges, if you look at everything out there, there's a lot of great stuff out there, and each to their own of what people find that works for them. Listen, if someone's doing something that they find works, I love it, do it. But with these guys in general, a lot of things I found, especially for men over 40, they don't take into consideration their lifestyle already, meaning the timing that they have, the obligations that they have. They don't take in consideration their changing hormones. Hormones start to change as we get older. And also the ability to actually get them to get their energy levels back first, or at least get them on the path of getting that energy back so that they can actually, implement the strategies. Most of the stuff out there, it's almost like a shotgun approach. They'll just throw them right to the wolves, and it's like, these guys may have not been off the couch in a year or 2 years or even 5 years. And all of a sudden they're doing like power cleans, and they're like, getting yelled at and talked down to, like, you don't want it bad enough. And like, listen, if that works for some, that's fine. But I've found if we're looking for sustainability and we're looking to change their lifestyle in a way that's going to serve them, not just in 90 days, but for a lifetime, well, then why not set it up in a way that gets them their energy back, allows them to be consistent, and actually not just, and I even say this, to all my clients, or even in my book, if you look at everything out there from the quick fix standpoint, if people were to read the 12 to 24 minutes and all that stuff that I have, they might say, well, that sounds like a quick fix. No, because we're doing it in a way that's conducive to get them on the path of consistency and a lifestyle. A quick fix is like, hey, I want to get ready for a beach vacation and, drop 10 pounds and do a miserable approach. I've deemed it in a way of like, hey, let's get your life back. Let's get your life back so that you can enjoy everything that you're working so hard for, enjoy the fruits of your labor, be fun to be around, and all of that. So does that cover anything? If I missed anything,
absolutely.
Let me know. There's so many more challenges, but those are the ones that come to my head immediately.
Yeah, no, Logan, it definitely does. And you touch on a lot, and you mentioned about 40s, right? So I myself being 50 now, right? I'm really glad you touched on something there about hormones, right? I did an episode about this before where we got into a little bit more detail about sarcopenia. And I don't think that enough men are really paying attention to this. What Logan says, it's so important because each day we choose to put it off, that's a day further away, and it becomes harder. And, I know I started at 47. I tried earlier in my 40s to start, it was easier back then, but Logan gives a lot of good insight in his program and in his book about this type of stuff that we as older men need to pay attention to. And Logan, I just want to take 1 second here before I decided to interview Logan. I actually signed up for Logan's program. I thought it made sense. I'm going to, along with, no worries. Along with other things I'm doing, I wanted to implement some of the things Logan had mentioned, because for myself, my lifestyle, along with being a busy business professional at 50, with a wife, with kids, I needed to really try to get everything on the right path. But anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know, when you hear 12 minutes, don't think a quick fix, and don't think it's not going to do anything. Because I can tell you, I did one of the workouts in Logan's program the other day, 12 minutes, and I went at it pretty hard, and I burned 260 calories doing it. And I felt great the rest of the day. So a lot of what Logan's saying is true. So please pay attention to that. Logan, I'll ask here now, you mentioned a lot of like the roadblocks, we'll say, right? And things that hinder people from getting on that right path. What are some strategies that may help people overcome this? Because I like to say to people a lot about this. It's all these outside stressors that we have. Those outside stressors, they very quickly become our excuses. And we love to make them our excuses. We as humans, we want excuses. Sad to say. Yeah. So what are any strategies you might be able to give to help people listening to this to maybe move past that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. As humans, we tend to fall in the line of justifying, rationalizing, maybe giving into excuses. It can be human nature, but when it comes to overcoming or coping, especially if someone's really busy and, they always find themselves maybe with the best intentions, and yet they fall short, and they're like, man, I'm sick and tired of, like even sometimes with my guys, I'm sick and tired of false starts. Like they'll start and then they'll stop. They'll start and stop. So real quick, first off is I would say the very first thing is, and this is going to sound different. Like, so if I have what I call the 4S success formula, and it goes into like systems, structure, scheduling, and support. Now, you'll see it in that order, but I actually going to take the end of it, and support is probably the number one. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people are trying to go after something and they will not have, like, I think as men, we're very good at not sharing, what we're doing. Sometimes we want to go after something and we'll like keep it to ourselves. Like sometimes we won't even tell our spouses. And I found that a lot with the guys that I work with. They will keep it to themselves because they don't want anyone to know that they're feeling off, right? Because then it'll come off as I'm weak, I'm whining, or anything like that. When in reality, I found that those that actually want to make a change, like men do ask that the men do ask for help, the successful ones anyways. That's what I've learned. And what I mean by that is that even if it's just your spouse, is making agreements with the people in your world that matter the most and bring them in on why it is like, hey, honey, I'm tired of feeling like shit. I'm tired of not giving you the attention you deserve. I'm coming home. I have no energy left. I've got to be able to fix this. And I'd love your support with this. Right. So it's first bringing that person on board. And the reason why is because people in your environment, they don't know what they don't know. And so if you're trying to, you start some fitness plan or you're doing things on your own, they can't support you or because they don't know what's going on there. So what are they going to do? They're going to put more on your plate. They're going to be like, what do you mean you're eating this? Why is it? So they're going to start, there's going to be confliction between what you want to do. So number one is find support, whether it's in your world, make sure to set up agreements, get people that are on board with you, share with them, like even before guys ever even come into any of my programs or even work with me. And some of them are shocked. If they are married or they have a spouse or they are, have a girlfriend or whatever, I ask them, who in your world matters the most to you that you would deem as important enough that they should be on this journey with you to some degree. And, they might say my wife, and I'll say, okay, before we move any further with any of this, can you do me a favor and make sure to go sit down with her, share with her what you're considering doing, why you feel it's important for you, and what you feel you need from her. And they're almost shocked. Like, why does that matter? Because even if they are like, I can do whatever, make decisions on yeah, I'm sure you can. But if 2 weeks down the line, they're not on board and all of a sudden you're bringing in, healthy stuff into the house, they're not used to it, or they see you, doing your morning routine in the morning or something like that, and they're not on board with it. Now, guess what? You're going to be facing resistance. They're going to be there's going to be clashing. And then before you know it, it's like that whole, well, I might as well. It's easier just not to do it than to try it all. So first, get that support somewhere in your world. Make sure that people in your world set up agreements. Another thing kind of attached to that is setting non-negotiables. Right? I think non-negotiables are principles and values and things that are in alignment with your goals that you won't waver because you deem them as important, right? If you think about anything in your world that's super important to you, most times people will move mountains to make that important thing happen, right? But if it doesn't mean that much, or they haven't set it in stone, like if there was a guy that maybe, like some of my guys, I'll give you an example. One of my clients is 45. He plays recreational hockey, and he, on Mondays, he never misses a recreational hockey game. Like he literally, and he travels, so he travels constantly, but yet he'll always make sure that Monday he doesn't miss that hockey game. That hockey game is a non-negotiable for him. He will do anything in his power to make it. So my point is creating non-negotiables. And a non-negotiable for me would be like, every morning I've got to create some space for myself. Doesn't need to be like you see out there now with a lot of people, like you got to give up 2 hours of your morning and, journal your life away and, work out for 2 hours. I'm not saying that stuff's not good, but again, time is of the essence. So for me, morning routine, even if it's 12 minutes, 20 minutes, that's a non-negotiable for me. My wife knows that. She, respects that. She's on board with it. She actually joins in with it, right? And even when we're traveling, I still do that. So making sure, A, have support, B, make sure that you have non-negotiables in place and that people know what those are. And then especially with guys in general, is making sure that the schedule is in line, like reworking time, because, a lot of times you'll hear, and I think from a lot of people in this industry, they all mean well, right? And what I mean by that is like, if someone's helping someone with their health or anything, but I don't like, when people are like, oh, when you say you don't have time, make the time, right? Here's the thing. My guys really do have very little time. And so, but instead of, kind of putting them down and using that like, oh, come on, just make the time, I've created systems to be able to help them rework their time. They have standing meetings, but now they've got to be able to put it in a way of like, let's get you in order. And so you know what's going on, just like with your standing meetings. And let's make sure to prioritize, when are you getting you in, right? And who needs to be on board with this? Where does that look like in your schedule? And typically, for us, in my world, it's usually the mornings, because here's the thing, even though as people and as humans in general, we have the best intentions to get it on later on in the day of like, I'll get my workout in later, or, I'll make sure to just get whatever later. In my guys' world, and just in general, in my world as well, it's like, maybe the kids get sick, or maybe, the wife needs something on the way home, or another work project pops up and now someone else wants your attention. Guess what? You had the best intentions in the morning, and yet you said, I'm going to get it later on in the day. 9 times out of 10, I found it doesn't happen later in the day. If you can get it later in the day and call an audible, great, do it. But I'm talking from a consistency standpoint. So getting that scheduling right and reworking time. And, we have systems involved with that, which then brings me into systems. And that is in terms of, systems are the things that take you from point A to point B and making sure that things are on point. So with systems, it could make sure that you have, like, let's say you have a hard time in the morning. I'll give you an example, sticking to morning routines, right? Instead of waking up and all of a sudden kind of, meandering over to the closet and you're trying to figure out what am I going to wear to work out? What am I to, like, lay that out the night before. Make sure that before the week happens that you've got things prepared. And with my guys, normally they're so crunched on time. If they can food prep or someone in their household is open to it, cool. But otherwise I say, hey, just like in business, delegate. If you can get something, even if you're ordering out meals that are in alignment with your goals, make sure that that's set on Sunday. So the less variables that we have, especially as busy guys or busy humans in general, the less variables that we have to deal with, the less decision fatigue and mental fatigue that we can just go, and it becomes like literally clothes are laid out, boom, meals are set, boom. That makes things so much easier. But when you add more variables of, okay, you've now got to make maybe you got a huge negotiation deal that you got to deal with at work. And now you got to figure out what you're going to eat. Now you got to figure out what you're going to wear. All these things are happening. If you don't have systems in place to decrease those variables, well, then guess what? Our default will always be struggle. Always. If you come home, you don't have things prepared, and you got, the only thing you have in your fridge is like ice cream, or freezer is ice cream. After a long day, probably going to take the edge off with some ice cream, right? Because you don't have things set already. So that's structure, or that's systems. And then of course, structure, which is making sure, just how you have structure in terms of work. And if you look at anywhere else in your life that you've had structure, 9 times out of 10, when structure is in place, you have order. Without order, as you know, and probably your listeners know, there is just chaos, like constant chaos. And I know some of them might be like, well, I thrive in the chaos. And I'll say, okay, that's cool. But how's that working for you with everything else? Like, how's that working in terms of taking care of yourself and your health? How are living life on your heels? How is that really working? Like, well, I guess it's not, because even though they may enjoy it, guess what? People can't rely on them because they overcommit to stuff that they can't follow through on. Not that they don't mean well, but they're overcommitting. They don't have structure in place. They don't have non-negotiables. So anyways, I blabbered on there. So hopefully.
No, listen, I think you touch on so many really, really important topics there that, as you were saying it, my own mind, I'm sitting there going, yeah, that was, and not that I have this implemented totally by any means, right? I'm still a work in progress for all intents and purposes. I still need things I need to fix, right? But ultimately, some of the things you touched on, I feel like I had to, and it's the support. I mentioned this earlier to you before the podcast started. Since my wife and I have kind of been on this journey together, this journey has become not just easier to stick to, but it's become more enjoyable. And she's doing a fantastic job. And, we help counterbalance each other, because there's going to be days where it may be her, it may be me, where we want to maybe go off the rails a little bit, right? And then there's that person there who's not willing to go off the rails, and you gain some strength from that. So I would say to my listeners, yes, support is extremely important, and look for it, because most times, Logan, I would say that if you're in a relationship with your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever, there's a good chance that you're living a unhealthy lifestyle together. And we are always very much like the people we are surrounded by. So that support is huge. Myself being a busy professional, the whole structure and planning, like my workouts now have to be in the morning. Like it's to the non-negotiables that you mentioned. I have it blocked in my calendar that nobody can put a meeting on my calendar between 8 and 9 a.m. in the morning, because I have that blocked out Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the year. Like, nobody can touch that.
I love it, man.
Do it. I'll also say this. I was that guy who I when it comes to work, and I still feel this way, I do thrive in chaos when it comes to work, right?
Well, yeah, I think we all do to agree, especially to do what we're doing in our nature.
Yeah, like, but I do agree 100% with you. Even though I'll say this to people, I may thrive in chaos at work. The only way I can thrive in the chaos at work is to have control of my life outside of work. Otherwise, it won't work. So you touched on so many great things there. So now I really couldn't wait to ask you this one, because I again, I mentioned this before we started recording. The whole quick fix, fad diets, all that good stuff. You know, my wife and I, we do get asked a lot about, what are you doing? And I hate to say it, but once you start to go through what we're doing, if it doesn't involve the quick fix or the fad diet, people tune out really quickly if it involves what I'll call doing things the right way. So why do the quick fixes and the fad diets, why do they almost seem to leave people worse than when they started it?
That's a really good question, man. And so there's a couple of things that I found from my experience. I'm sure there's more, but things that come off the top of my mind is, number one, they're of course not sustainable. They are, in a sense, they are giving someone, and I even mentioned this in my book as well, because people are trying to supplement something to fix. And I'm not saying that all things, there may be something that they legitimately need, but oftentimes they're trying to take the shortcut and supplement something and yet still live the same lifestyle that they're leading, right? Still doing the same habits and behaviors that keep them where they are. And yet they're trying to do this to mask whatever to mask it. So it's not sustainable. And in a lot of times, most of these approaches that are very quick and fad or whatever, at least from what my guys share and what I've seen just from anyone, they're miserable. Like most of people just loathe them. And even if it's like a 4-week thing, a 6-week thing, a 90-day thing, it's almost so restrictive and so non-sustainable that most of the time people cannot wait till they're over. And by the time that they're over, they're like, thank God that's over. And I tell all of my guys, if you ever do anything in your world where I'm not saying you're not going to face challenge, I'm not going to say like that's going to happen, right? But if you find yourself constantly thinking, when is this going to end? And then at the end of it saying, thank God that's over, consider you should not have done what you're doing in the first place, or you should have course corrected it in a way that would be in alignment to where you could see yourself doing what you're doing 1 year from now. If you cannot see what you're doing 1 year from now, then why in the world would you even start it in the first place, or at least get it there? So number one, not sustainable. Number two is it doesn't get to the root of the problem. If someone is out of shape and that's how they've been, right? I'm not saying that it's necessarily to their own wrongdoing, but oftentimes there is a reason why they are where they are. Unless they have a huge medical condition that just forces them to be that way, oftentimes there's behaviors that have led them to that. And if they don't get down to the bottom and go upstream of really getting down to, okay, what's your relationship with food? Why is it at night after a long day, you're going to grab a cocktail constantly, or you're going to the pantry to grab the kids' snack foods, right? Most quick fixes or fads do not touch base on that. And if they don't get to really the crux of who that person is at the core and why that behavior is happening, again, 8 weeks, they may lose 20 pounds and, be like, yeah, I'm ready for Hawaii. But then they're going to be sadly upset because not only, if they didn't get their behaviors in check, they're going to come back and say, thank God that's over. Don't have another vacation for another 90 days, 6 months. Cool. Let's just binge. And what that does actually is it causes, if we're talking from a physical standpoint, especially if someone's on a diet, a really restrictive diet, it will cause overshooting. This is what I tell all of my guys that, even if they go through 90 days with me, or, I've had clients been with me for 3 years. If they go through the initial 90, I don't, if they're like, hey, I got this on my own, I'm like, great, go do it. But do me a favor. Make sure you always find something that's going to allow you to keep pushing forward and keep striving for. The reason being is because if they don't, if they don't meet their metabolism matched with their appetite, so the metabolism typically will go, if someone's transforming their body or physical presence, typically the metabolism will slightly drop, but then also the appetite will increase. So if they're doing something very restrictive, like overly restrictive, man, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced it. I'm sure one of your listeners experiences where they've done something overly restrictive. They're like, wow, I got this. And then all of a sudden they hit a stalling point, and they, one day of celebration after they, lost maybe 20 pounds turns into 2 days, 2 months, 3 months. And before you know it, they overshoot the weight that where they were when they started. And they're like, what the hell? And they're like, what's going on? And it's frustrating. And because they keep riding this roller coaster of just constant, whether it's with weight loss, whether it's with their energy. So that second point, not only not sustainable, but it also doesn't get to the root of the problem of actually what is really going on for that specific individual that's causing them to do certain behaviors. And then I would say that the next one is it kind of goes in terms of it's going to constantly take challenging yourself in a way, like whatever, if you've gotten your energy back or you've gotten in shape, if you want to stay there, you've got to constantly manage it, right? It's kind of like, your vehicle. If you use maybe this is cliche, but if you don't keep the fine-tuned maintenance on your vehicle, eventually you're going to have a problem. You're going to have to take it in, and there's going to have to be some mechanical problems going to be worked. Or if you don't cut your lawn or even have someone else, whatever, the grass is eventually going to look like crap. And so, and I always bring an example to all of my guys, because I know that if they're in the business world or they're leading teams, I always use this example because I think it hits, especially at the core. As I said, imagine if you were to just say, you had a really good, I don't know, maybe you had your company hit like a really great quota, right? And you knocked it out of the park, like all the team you were leading, everyone's on fire. And then even if you had time that you could take off for yourself, but I said, let's say there wasn't time and you just said, you know what, I'm going to sack this off for 6 months. I'm going to sack this off for 6 months. I said, what do you think would happen? They're like, well, I said, do you think it'd probably go to shit? Yeah, maybe. Okay. And I say, okay, what if your relationship, if you ignored your wife for 4 weeks out of the month, and then you decide to hang out with her one weekend? How do you think that relationship is going to go? Or if you want to use your kids, you only play with them every other month. What do you think is going to happen to that? So though that may sound like a dramatic example, it's the same thing within our body and our health. And you have to constantly do something. And again, finding something for yourself that's simple, satisfying, and most importantly, sustainable, that you can see yourself doing in the long term instead of just this short term quick fix. So that basically sums up where I'm thinking in terms of quick fixes. There's probably many more, but that's just what I'm thinking right now.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I like, Logan, I say this to people. This is one of my kind of slogans that I like to say to people. I always say, as far as like our fitness in general, this could be used for anything. And I tell people it's very helpful, is that we should always look to make the best version of ourselves be the next version of ourselves. We should we should never be satisfied with who we are and think that it ends, because it doesn't. And especially with fitness, my journey now is 3 years. And, if I along the way would have decided to stop along that journey, I'm probably going to go back. I call it the yo-yo effect, right? And I've been guilty of this throughout my life, in my younger years, even, where I would lose weight quickly, do a 90-day thing, lost a lot of weight. Oh my God, look at me. And then the next 4 months, I was so worn out from, doing that, restricting myself. And then next thing I know, 90 days later after that, I'm almost back to the weight I was, And I think another thing you touched on a little bit, that I tell people also this: whatever you're thinking of doing as far as the quick fix, just do me one favor before you do it. Just look at the alternative of how does a more sustainable, longer term solution look? And I tell people all the time, you'll be shocked. You get, oh my God, well, I lost, 20 pounds in the first month. And I say to people, if you went the other way and did something that was more sustainable, you'd be surprised. You probably would have lost that same 20 pounds and you would have been happier doing it. And you'd still be doing it after that first initial phase. So you touch on so many good things. And I have to be honest, there's so many more things that I would love to pick your brain on. And I'm thinking already that you're one of the guests that I'm like, we might be able to do a whole episode on some of these other things. So we might have to do that.
I'd be honored, man.
Yeah. So that being said, I'd like to take the second now. I think the information you're providing is important to people. And I think it's important that people seek out people like yourself. I'm an everyday guy doing a podcast now who's actually got my shit together, so to speak, finally. So I'm hoping to maybe drive people in the right direction, but I'm by no means an expert. So I look to get experts like Logan. So Logan, that being said, let people know how they can get in touch with you and maybe a bit about, what they'll get if they seek you out and your book, Regain Your Edge. How can it be helpful?
Yeah, thank you, man. And here's the thing. I first want to say, Charles, I love what you're doing. It's funny. You mentioned getting better every single day. I listened to that podcast that you did solo before we connected. Yesterday, I listened to it. So exactly what you said in terms of always getting better than you were. I always say it's like, you just have to be a little bit better than you were yesterday, right? If you can do that, and I always say, and focus on, I think I've learned from experience, there is either progression or regression. There's no middle ground. And so if you can understand that in all facets of your life, usually the blueprint for success is already in your life. You're already doing it somewhere in your life. You're really good at something and you're showing progression, right? So if you can do that with yourself, you're going to be winning. But as you said, if anybody, resonated with this at all and they're, busy, high performer, over 40, and they'd like to learn more, especially get more of kind of like a foundation or even as a catalyst game plan to help them get in the right start, I would say my book, Regain Your Edge, is a really good place to start. I give a lot in there, like practical things that someone could instantly go implement. And that would be the thing is I could only hope that, remember, information I've learned does not equal transformation. It's the implementation of that information. There is a lot of great things out there. There is a lot of great information out there, but it's what that person does with it. So I can only hope that if someone decides to, put their resources towards my book, which I'm very appreciative of, that they take it and they actually put it into action so that they can change their world. But Regain Your Edge, they can find it over at www.logan-henry.com/regain your edge. Or if they just go to www.logan-henry.com, it'll be there on the homepage. They can click on that and the book will appear. So that's pretty much it.
Great. And everyone that's listening and watching, I'm going to put some links in the episode guide for Logan's information to make it a little bit easier for you guys to find. I would suggest it. I deal with a lot of people and friends, and Logan, I'm going to look to connect with you on LinkedIn. Also, I'm up there.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I think this is almost the perfect podcast for the LinkedIn crowd, if I'm being totally honest. So
I would love that, man. Yeah.
So everyone, please seek out Logan and some of this information. And if it's not Logan, honestly, just look
anyone. Seek out anyone. That's what I can say. If they were like, I wasn't catching this vibe, that would be my invitation. It's like, I might not be the guy or whatever, but find someone. Like, stop trying to do it on your own. Like I said, I think good men do ask for help, at least the successful ones. That's what I've learned. So take your smarts and your skill set and go find someone to be in your corner so that you can no longer be where you are.
Logan, that's great stuff. And I'll just end with this. For all of us, especially the, older crowd, the successful business professionals, don't be arrogant enough to think that you still don't need mentors in your life. We all do. So seek them out.
Still got them in my life, man.
So that being said, thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate you listening. Please share if you think this will be valuable to anyone else. That being said, everybody take care. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Charles.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.